Welcome to our brand new podcast from the Scottish Land Commission, The Lay of the Land. I'm Calum Maclean, a photographer, broadcaster and documentary maker. If you've ever heard of the Scottish water temperature chart, or if you've seen a video of a man being eaten alive by midges for a minute online, well, that's me. And I also have a keen interest in all things land in Scotland. This new podcast aims to explore what land means to the people of Scotland, from the way it is used and owned and how these decisions are made, to the reuse of derelict sites and the wonderful transformations that have happened in communities across Scotland. Land matters because we all use and need it. The way we own and use land influences many parts of our lives. The price and availability of housing, access to green spaces and nature, effects of derelict sites in the hearts of communities, being able to tackle climate change, and whether people have the means and confidence to build businesses and communities. Through discussion with a variety of guests, we will explore how we can become more involved with the land around us, and how being more engaged in the conversation can bring wonderful benefits to our lives and our local communities. Our first podcast will be speaking to two of the team involved in a new initiative called After the Pandemic. Graham Hogg is co-founder and Anne Johnson project manager. They are curating a creative and cultural hub for Glasgow in the run-up to and during COP26. The project will activate 3,000 square metres of vacant land along the River Clyde to put people and communities at the heart of the COP26 conversation. Hello, Graham. Hello, Anne. How are you doing?
Hi, good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Now, can you guys tell me a bit about the After the Pandemic project for COP26? Why is it called After the Pandemic in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So After the Pandemic began in the first lockdown. Is After the Pandemic at COP is one of the projects that we're running, but there is a number of other projects that After the Pandemic is leading on as well. And so After the Pandemic began when we realized that there was an opportunity in response to the pandemic to talk about how creativity and design can respond to the pandemic within communities and through collaboration. And so we, on the 8th of May last year, put out a manifesto that said, how do we rethink, reimagine and redesign Glasgow to be greener, sustainable and more resilient? And that manifesto has sat with us ever since. And a sort of big part of what we'd done at the start was invite people to contribute their ideas to the platform. And a lot of those were around land ownership and how we get access to land within Glasgow. And so that's where there was a nice bit of serendipity that Anne got in touch with us. And she can tell you a little bit more about her background, but it was like the perfect match about how we bring design and creativity with environmental and brownfield sites. So it was this sort of perfect synergy, and ever since then we've been developing After the Pandemic at COP.
Yeah, as Graham says, my background's in environmental and sustainability consultancy, and for a lot of my career I've worked on vacant and derelict sites, including like huge sites like Ravenscraig, down to like really tiny sites, and I also I sit on the Scottish Vacant and Derelict Land Task Force, and I grew up in a former mining village in an area where there's a lot of quarrying, and so had a lot of kind of like personal experience of what it was like to live alongside sites that had been left derelict for generations really, and it was really kind of from that. So I felt it was important. Glasgow has the highest density of vacant and derelict land in Scotland, urban vacant and derelict land, and so I felt it was really important to focus on that, to draw attention to that and during COP, and to look at how how vacant and derelict land can play a part in actually dealing with the climate emergency and the other kind of things that come along from that. And so As Graham says, it was serendipity. I was a partner in a real estate consultancy until kind of June last year. I decided to hand my notice in and leave that job and set up my own business. And round about the same time, almost exactly the same time that I did that, I saw some stuff on Twitter about the after the pandemic summer school, and it really resonated with me. And so I got in touch with Graham and one of the other after the pandemic founders, Fergus, and we had a call about this idea and what we could do about it. And basically from that, we identified the site that we've now got, City Wharf, as being perfectly positioned to do something. And through a kind of like series of fortunate coincidences and connections and things, managed to get in front of the developer, the landowner, Dandara, and they really liked our suggestion for using it as a main well use, and gave us a license to occupy 3,000 square metres of the site that we are now activating as a cultural park for COP.
So during COP26, if I turned up at this site, at this event, what am I going to see? What's going to be in front of me?
So that is a good question. It's something that we're still developing, but to give you a sort of an overview, it will be a huge outdoor exhibition in the first instance. So that will be what you'll primarily see. We're working with a lot of partners who have a lot of content, and that might be exhibition designs, it might be interpretation panels, it might be artworks. So we're currently working with over 100 different organizations to kind of deliver on that sort of content element. But then the other element is that it's not just going to be an outdoor exhibition space, there'll also be programs. So there'll be music, there'll be theatre performances, there'll be people doing workshops and activities. So there's a whole host of different activities. And so we're trying to bring that together into a program of events for the 12 days, which we've got 12 themes that we're looking to look at these through, which kind of range from the built environment through land ownership, through to arts and culture, education. So each day will have its own theme, and then the program and content will be directed in that sort of way for that day. So we're very much looking at 12 days of activity, and one day it might be really, really active and there's thousands of people on site, and other days it might be something that you're just kind of meandering around the exhibition and it's a much more quiet and reflective space. But that will be led by the people that we're working with and the people that we're designing this space for. So while we've got a lot of ideas ourselves, we want it to be a collective representation of Glasgow and Scotland and the communities, both within Glasgow and Scotland, but also others from around the world, so inviting them to contribute as well. So we're very much looking at it from a local level, and not, while COP itself is looking at a national and international level, we're much more focused on how people can enact ideas at a really local level within their community, and how that can address we're facing at a global level.
And why was it important for you guys to use derelict land for this project?
I think because if you walk by this site right now, I say it's really dull. It's really there's nothing there. It's in a part of Glasgow, as well as the site itself being vacant and derelict. It's for the past 10 years. Half the site's been used as a car park, so that half of the site has nothing on it. It's just sort of like grey type one. The other half actually has it does actually have some biodiversity. It's got some self-seeded trees and things like that. But it's right next to the Kingston Bridge as well. So it's in a part of Glasgow that is actually really close to the city centre. But I think psychologically to the people of Glasgow, it feels as if it's really far away because it's really disconnected. And that essentially is what vacant and derelict land does, regardless of where it is. It creates this sense of disconnect. And this site in particular, because of its kind of strategic location, because it is actually going to be where there will be a new community, within the site itself and the site next door, are both now kind of in the very early stages of construction for rented accommodation. So there will be a community living there within the next few years, and where for a long time there hasn't been. So we wanted to do something that wasn't, that it wasn't just going to be for COP. It's not just going to, that there'll be lots of activity during COP, but this is as much about the legacy and kind of saying, how can we activate this site as, a future community? How can we take learning from things that we do there and apply it to other vacant and derelict sites across the city that don't have a definite future like this one does? So those were, a kind of a couple of the reasons, but also because, it really did give us an opportunity to think about it from the point of view of that community engagement. This is a space where people can come and hopefully make new connections and learn a bit more about what the climate crisis and what's going on at COP actually means to them. There'll be lots of things obviously going on within the green zone and the blue zone, but this is about, first and foremost, about Glasgow and about the people of Glasgow.
And you spoke that you were the one that spoke to the landowner. How did you find the process of, finding that suitable space? How did you get started initially?
Well, so Graham and Fergus and I kind of got started by just looking at aerial photos, and this particular site jumps out because it's equidistant between the SEC and the city centre. So it's you kind of think, right, something's got to happen there, and then the actual process of kind of getting in front of the landowner, I just went and looked at the planning portal. That was my first port of call, so just to find out, well, actually, who does own this land? What's happening with it? So I looked it up on the planning portal, found the planning application, and then discovered that I knew the planning consultant, who's called Terry Porter, and very grateful to Terry. So I got in touch with her and asked her if she could set a meeting up for us with Dandara, which she did. So she got a meeting with us, set up with Zoe Sharp, who's the development director, and Graham and I kind of pitched a very early concept to Zoe of what we would like to do, and luckily she was completely receptive to that. And and I think a lot of it was just she wasn't kind of long in the position at the time. She just we clicked. We've got very similar kind of like outlooks and mindsets. So she went off to speak to the rest of the kind of senior management team, and then from that they came back to say, okay, the way our construction programme is going to go, this part of the site we're not going to be on this year, and therefore we're happy to give it to you as a mean well use. So there was a lot of luck and timing involved, but behind all of that, there was the benefit of having a good network and sort of, I think, just knowing where to go with that kind of initial first information. And I think it does help that Graham and I come from those kind of like different backgrounds and different worlds. That's also a big part of what we're doing here. My background is very much in the kind of like construction, real estate, that the kind of like technical side. And Graham comes from a design background, and and frankly, there's a lot of things going on in my world at the moment around ESG and kind of particularly around the kind of like social impact of the built environment, that mean that people have to they do have to open up to working with disciplines that they might not traditionally have worked with, and looking at projects in a different way and valuing them in a different way. And essentially that's what we are, kind of creating a framework for with after the pandemic.
I think also, Calum, so I come from an architectural background originally, as well, and I think what we're trying to do is something that is very innovative, because we're almost getting in front of a developer to work alongside them before the community has arrived. And so we're like, from a legacy perspective as well, we're trying to look at the land and how that can affect communities going forward. So I think within the architectural world, of the people that we've spoke to about this as a project, when we first talked to them about it, they're like, "You're mad. It's just, you're not gonna get a piece of land and be able to do that with a developer." But I think that it just shows, like, I think from as Anne's kind of talked about, like, Zoe has a similar sort of mindset as us, and is her kind of perspective and outlook, and the way that the businesses are having to adapt is focused more on climate change and how they engage with communities and bring them into the sort of project. So I think it was a really excellent kind of first meeting that we had with Zoe. And to be honest, I think Anne and I have reflected on this, like, in the last few months. It was that, like, first 2 minutes, and you could tell, because of Zoom, like, you meet someone and you see their face. And we knew from the moment that we met her, we're like, yeah, Zoe's in our corner, and she wants this to happen, and is excited about it as we are. So I think it's been a really good relationship with them so far. And I think it's something that, we're just really keen to use this as a way of innovating and challenging the norm and doing something quite unique and bespoke. And what other time in your life are you going to do it when there's a pandemic and a once in a century event, and then there's the climate emergency happening, all at once? And we need to do action now. We need to really try and address these huge challenges, but at a local level.
And how important do you see it for people in communities, across Scotland, not just, people that might have a background in architecture and construction, but how important is it for people to get involved in the land around them and how it's used, how it's owned, no matter where they are?
I think it's critical. I've had a couple of examples of this recently where I live in North Lanarkshire. So, one being that North Lanarkshire Council have consulted on a number of town centre hub plans and community hub plans. And then I kind of live near a site where there's a huge planning application going in, and there's a local democracy deficit, I think, really, and how people's understanding about what their rights are and what their views are, and how that should all be taken into account. And as Graham said, the thing about this is there's no community there at the moment, but there will be. And actually kind of flipping the thing on its head of asking the question of what should they expect, and the particular type of development that's going to go on the City Wharf site will be aimed at kind of young professionals. It'll be aimed at kind of you're going to have all these young people that are going through university at the moment that who've had an experience that the likes of us can't even begin to imagine what it's been like, and living in student accommodation and what that's been like for the past year and will continue to be like. And then they're going to come out and they'll be going into these like starter homes, and how much actual effort has there been to reach out to them and say, what do you need from these? Not just what you get within your own four walls, but what do you need and what do you want from the actual the development that surrounds you, the wider community, how that fits into your city. And there are so many questions around what city centres are for, what they're going to look to them and to the model that we've lived with for the past kind of like 40 years really. So that's that kind of, you just can't. People need to have a space, and they need to have a way, and they need to be given the language to talk about what it is that matters to them, so that those things feed into the decision-making process.
I think a lot of the conversation around land ownership also happened, like, traditionally, if you looked at Scotland as a whole, land ownership has always been seen as like a rural challenge. And I think there's like some great work that's been happening recently around, like, for example, Mid Steeple Quarter in Dumfries, and how they've actually taken ownership of some of the flats that are in Dumfries town centre. Well, there's only been like one person who's been living in the town centre for for at least the last 10, 20 years. But what they're looking to do is not just about the land itself, it's also about the buildings that are there and how we adapt that built heritage, how we reflect on it. And I think that there needs to be these conversations and these pieces of action research taking place within cities, so that people can realize that if a community is doing it in Dumfries, why can't we be doing it in our town or village or city centre? And that's what I think hoping to do as part of this project is, to be able to be given it. While there's certain aspects of it which are only meanwhile, it does show that there's lots of things that can be done in that sort of short period of time to engage with the community, to engage with the landowner as well, about what can actually go into the scheme beyond just the stuff that they submit for a planning application. I think that's been a really important part of the process that we've been going through, is actually introducing Dandara to different aspects of what we're doing, and them originally having no plans for it, and now all of a sudden being actually that sounds like quite a nice idea, so can we maybe integrate that as part of our final scheme? And just going back to the sort of built environment side of things as well, the site that we have has a quite a tragic past, in terms of in 1960 it was the scene of the Cheapside Street fire, which claimed the lives of 19 different people, and that's currently not reflected on the site at all. So we're working with the landowner to bring in the contacts that we have within the art community and the design community to potentially put a piece of public art on the site, but also to engage with the fire service around what that looks like, because there's so many of the fire service that died that evening. So I think that is another kind of to actually research the history and heritage of a place and how that can be reflected in different ways.
If you think about derelict sites more generally, and I'm thinking about Glasgow here, I used to live in Glasgow, and as someone that likes going out and taking photos, to some extent, I can see a bit of attraction in, decay and urban exploration. Some places that are very old and falling apart, there's a bit of an attraction to that. But overall, I found it maybe a bit depressing, seeing how many derelict sites there were. And we know that almost a third of the Scottish population lives within 500 metres of a derelict site. So what effect do you think this has on communities?
I think it does vary depending on whether it's an urban location or a rural location. But my kind of view on it, again, having kind of worked on, investigated a lot of these sites, and as I said, also sort of grown up alongside them, is there's a lot of kind of compounding factors to it. For one thing, if it means that there's an area where there's, I know, a lot of kind of antisocial behaviour, fly tipping and stuff like that, it makes it harder for people to, it essentially kind of brings down an entire area. I think it does undermine how people feel about their own local environment and how other people do as well. I think it's no coincidence that there's certain parts of Glasgow that will have a reputation for for different kind of social problems, are also the ones that have high incidences of vacant and derelict land. And it kind of doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way at all. That there's, I think it's because it so often gets reduced to the economic value of the land, and that kind of feeds back to what you were asking before about people locally getting involved, because if you kind of genuinely stop to ask and think about, well, what other value does this land have? What other functions does it fulfill? What does it mean to people? And how can we kind of enhance those aspects of it, and just kind of getting people to think about, well, what else could this be? It kind of creates an environment where you hopefully can actually strengthen community bonds, rather than having people at odds with each other because you've got this big problem right in the middle of your community.
Is the idea, well, would you want people that come, to after the pandemic at COP26, do you want them to go away with the idea that they could create a more resilient community where they live, where they could have an idea that improves health and well-being where they are? Is that what you want to inspire people that come along?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. It's I think there's lots of ways that we're looking to do that that are more permanent as well, and actually like showing on site some of the ways that you can be innovative. So that's it might be around like sort of community gardens, or ways that you can plant trees locally, and how you can introduce all these different green elements, which help with health and well-being. It helps with the sort of the aesthetic of a place, but it also serves a function environmentally, and helps towards the climate emergency at a local level. So I think very much so we're looking to use this space as an inspiration for other communities and for people to take back these ideas. So that's why it's so obviously something that we want to have from a Glasgow and Scotland perspective, but we also want to bring people from Santiago and from Sydney, and that they are presenting their work, because at the end of the day, COP, is an international event, and that we want to bring those communities to our site to talk about what they're doing at a really local level to green their city, to make their space more vibrant, more colourful, more aesthetically pleasing, and how people within Glasgow and within Scotland can go about doing that themselves. And even within Glasgow, there's so many different different ways, different projects that we've either visited or know about, that are doing that already. There was just one last weekend that was like a lane that sits between two tenement blocks that back onto each other in the south side of Glasgow, and the guy that's run that is just really thrifty and just kind of finds stuff and skips and other elements. And there was someone throwing out a bathroom set, so he got the sink, and now that's set up as like a vanity unit within the lane. But it's just so nice, and it's one of my favorite places in Glasgow now, and it's just because of like one person, and how he's then engaged with his neighbours and got them involved, but they've kind of done it off their own steam as well. And it's not for everyone. Not everyone's got to be interested and excited by that, but I think that just getting those people to take inspiration from other communities, and to go back to their communities to do something similar is a huge aim of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I remember somebody making it, one of the meetings that we had quite early on. I can't remember who it was now, but I remember someone saying, "Oh, I've walked past that site loads of times and always kind of thought it'd be really good if something could happen there, but it didn't occur to me to go and ask or whatever." And I think maybe that's a big part of it. A lot of the time, people always think somebody else is going to do it. So hopefully it will inspire some people just to decide to take action. But as much as that, there's also been kind of really interesting schemes like Glasgow's Stalled Spaces programme, and a number of to like varying degrees of success through that. But the kind of like barrier to entry can be quite high and quite daunting if you've got no background in these things. So again, just being able to showcase what other people have done, help facilitate all those connections, so that if you do have a group of people that have got the will but they just don't know where to start, that by kind of engaging with us, they maybe meet other people that can then actually practically help them. Those are all things that we really kind of that we see very much as being the legacy of what we're doing.
And have you seen any benefits of bringing back the site, back into use, the site that you're using for the people that live nearby currently?
So at the moment, I think that the primary source of impact that we've had so far is through like sort of social media, just in terms of talking about it at the moment. At this precise moment in time, there hasn't been like a huge amount of activity as of yet. That's going to happen in the next few weeks. But one of the things that I think has been really interesting is that we've been working quite closely with a street artist, and is an organisation called Colorways, which works with young people to talk about art and design within street art, and actually, empowers them to highlight that it's not just kind of, it doesn't have to just be about tags and graffiti, and it can be something that's much more impactful and talks about different subjects. So one of the street artists that we worked with responded to Robert Burns' Day, and actually on site you can now go down and see this. It's a huge sort of piece of street art that talks. It's a poem that was written by Miss Punnypenny, so the Scots poet, and he's interpreted her poem and turned it into this really beautiful piece of street art. And while he was doing that, there was someone coming across the Kingston Bridge who's seen him doing it, and then came all the way around. So you have to, I mean, it's not like you can just come off the Kingston Bridge and you're right there. It's quite a long way. It's like a full 5-10 minutes in the car before you get actually to the site. And this person came down and said, "What are you doing?" And then they talked about it, and he was like, "Oh, it looks amazing. It's so cool." And so that was like a very small piece. But there's also been people who've been using that piece of street art now for like the backdrop to their photos and other elements, because it's just kind of became really iconic with a very small level. But I think that that's what we're hoping will be the case over the sort of coming weeks and months in the run up to COP26. That the space becomes something, and not to reveal anything at the moment, but it will be, while the site is very tonally, yes, it's very brown and green at the moment, and sort of natural looking. We're going to completely transform that into something that's vibrant and colorful and really bright. So it should be something that people will see and hopefully just put a smile on their face, because it is something that's going to be really colorful. But I think, talking about specifically the local people themselves, there isn't a huge amount of local people in the area, apart from there is like a block of flats at the end of the road. So we've been engaging with one of the residents there about how we can engage with them and bring them into the conversation, be part of the space. And that's something that, again, is really important to us, is ensuring that engagement does take place with local people. So I think it's really good that we've got them involved, and that they're really excited about the opportunity to contribute as to the work that we're doing.
Tell me, what is the future for after the pandemic? Do you have plans for other derelict sites in urban areas? What comes next?
So we're so as an initiative, we're while this is taking up a lot of our time at the moment, we also do have a number of other projects on. We're working on a design school in Greater Pollock with the council, and also the G53 Together group. So that's like something that's really exciting, and there's lots of conversations around the vacant and derelict land that is within Greater Pollock itself. So that's something that we will hopefully be continuing to work alongside the community on going forward. And I think there's already some really good ideas about what those sites could be used for. It's just a case of there needs to be that sort of the political will, as well as funding and other elements to start to activate those sites. But I think that's what is hopefully going to come out of the design school. Other than that, yes, we're speaking to a number of other organisations and businesses, and also community groups around Glasgow. So that includes the Glasgow Community Food Network, about how we activate other spaces as after the pandemic spaces, and bring design and creativity to those sort of projects. So it's something that is very much I think we're still at quite a embryonic stage of developing after the pandemic as a social enterprise, and so that's something that in our future business plan will be a big part about how we work alongside Glasgow communities and Scottish communities and others around the world to activate their spaces.
Great. And what would you say, thinking about your whole experience through this process, getting this project started, which obviously It hasn't even physically taken place, as it were, yet. What have you learned throughout the whole experience?
Wow. So to step out your comfort zone for a start, and also just to kind of get started. So if I think back, if we think back to those original conversations, essentially for me it was kind of being able to be here and doing this now kind of came about from making a really big decision, to step away from a good job and take a risk. Without really knowing what was going to happen, and certainly not planning it would be this, but that meant I was open to this opportunity. So I've definitely learned that for a start. And then, and again, personally, it has meant getting, working with a huge range of people who are very different to the types of people that I wouldn't normally work with professionally. So finding out all sorts of things about design, about events, about so it's a massive learning curve, and kind of that knowing what you know and what you don't know, and getting people who do know what they're talking about involved once you kind of get beyond the stages. But I think the main thing is just being how important it is to have that kind of like the what comes when you have the kind of like level of trust that Graham and I have been able to build up. And we're at a stage now where this isn't what it's. I don't think in all honesty, it's going to turn out to be something that's way beyond what we were thinking about and intending at the beginning. But it's perfectly doable, and it's doable because of our commitment to it, and the team's commitment to it, and everybody that's involved is really giving it their all. And once you do, once you kind of start to do that, if you're willing to trust each other and then work on those things, you can incrementally achieve something pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I think one of the main things that I've learned is, and it goes back to someone who said, I can't remember who it was that said this when we first started up after the pandemic last May, but it was that because of the pandemic, there's going to be 10 years of innovation will happen in the next 2 years. And I think that that's always kind of stuck with me, that we're not going to get a second chance at the climate emergency, and that we really need to embrace inclusion, accessibility. We need to bring lots of different people into the conversation. So I think while Anne and I are the project managers for this, we have a vast amount of experience in different disciplines that are working alongside us as well to deliver this. And so that, it ranges from people who are poets and storytellers to others who are ex-philosophers and but then designers and architects and structure engineers and lots of other people. And I think that it could have been, we could have done something that, we could have went to a specific funder and said, can you fund everything? And that would have been a much easier process, but it's not the process that we want to go through, because we want to involve as many different people as possible. And so I think that that's like been a huge learning opportunity for us, is about how we engage with different people from totally different disciplines and backgrounds, and how we try to bring them and their stories into this conversation.
Great. Anne, Graham, thank you very much. I feel quite inspired now to go and start asking questions about the derelict land around me. There's a couple of old curling ponds that I've kind of had my eye on for a while. And I'll definitely be visiting the After the Pandemic at COP26 in November as well.
Sounds good.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, thanks very much, Calum.
Thanks, Calum.
Cheers. So that was the first episode of the Lay of the Land podcast. Thank you so much to Graham and Anne for sharing their exciting plans for after the pandemic. I now feel inspired to see how I can take action and explore how I could be involved with the land around me. Make sure you follow them on social media for updates on their progress. If you would like more information about how you might get involved in the way land is owned and used in your area, visit MyLand.Scot for stories, news, and case studies for what's happening with the land around you. Join us for the next episode soon.